Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whatever time it is for you that you're listening to this, welcome to the Blue X Running Podcast. It is certainly episode number 31. It is episode 9 out of 10 in our marathon training series. We are finishing up, and yes, absolutely, yes, you guessed it, the marathon is done. By now, it has been run. I ran Grandma's Marathon last Saturday on the 21st of June, and this episode is really just going to be to kind of breathe a little bit, kind of recap. I'm not going to give any major tips and tricks as far as recovery goes. That's going to be my last episode, is to get into another week of recovery and probably release that by the end of next week or so and have a question and answer session for next time. But this is just going to be kind of letting my brain process out loud a little bit about how the marathon went, how the weekend went, and I'm excited to do so because it kind of flies by. To be honest, I can't believe this, that I'm recording this on Wednesday. And I guess we're coming up on a week ago. Last Thursday is when I left for Duluth. So, man, these things, there's so much anticipation. You get ready, you do a lot of training, you run a lot of miles, and all of a sudden the week is upon you, and all of a sudden the week has passed you. It was very surreal to go through Grandma's Marathon. Let me just say up front, when I look back on the full experience, the Thursday through the Sunday trip, it honestly exceeded my expectations. I'm not talking about my race time or performance or anything like that. I'm just talking about when I look back on Grandma's Marathon 2025, I am going to have one of the fondest race weekends that I've ever really had. And it's really for a lot of reasons. So I want to talk about those reasons here. I'm still kind of processing everything that even happened. Let me start with even just kind of how the race went, and then I want to get into the non-race stuff. Okay, so for the race itself, I thought coming in I was going to be running, maybe in the low 230s. I thought I would be running low 230s. That's what all my workouts were saying. I thought maybe on a great day, on a perfect day, even some of the weather that was forecasted in the 50s, maybe a high in the low 60s with a tailwind that was being shown for a long while. I'm like, man, if I could break 230, that would exceed my expectations. So that's kind of how I went in. I ran 112 and a half in the tune-up race. You can look back on a previous episode about that. I thought I'd come through the half in about 116 or so and try to 115 something, 116 something, and try to pick it up from there. I will say this: the North Shore, Duluth, the Midwest, in the month of June, you never know what you're going to get for weather. And I was told that going in. I've had people, I've talked to people that have run this race 10 times, 20 times, even 40 sometimes. And it could be a hot year. It could be 90 and humid. It could be raining at the start. It could be raining all the way through. You could have snow pants on with the spectators. It could be cold. One year, my cousin said that she saw her memories and she was in like a down jacket. And the weather on the shore is different than the weather, even half mile off or 2 miles up the hill on the shore or off the shore. So weather is the wild card. Weather is absolutely the wild card. If you want predictable weather, sorry, the Midwest is the Midwest, And what ended up happening was I was tracking it all week. And it's, if it's still kind of too early to track unless you're really driving to the start line, because the weather ended up being really humid. The weather ended up being warm and humid, not super hot, scorching hot and humid, but it was warm and humid, and it was warmer than we thought, earlier than we thought. So the hottest day of the whole weekend was supposed to be Sunday. The race was Saturday, and that ended up coming through, and that whole front came through earlier than what they kind of predicted with models. And so we woke up to a bunch of thunderstorms in the middle of the night before the race. They delayed the start, and we ended up starting at 8:15 instead of 7:45, and it was already sticky, just nasty sticky. And as you run along that shore, I did have some miles of light breeze, some dry breeze, and then it would get humid again. The sun would come out, and then it would go back. And so it was just overall a little stickier and hotter than normal. We were at a yellow caution flag for weather, and then by the end of the marathon, they were at a red caution flag. So nothing in the purple, or what do they call it, black. It wasn't like, it wasn't the worst. It could have been better. It could have been worse as far as weather goes. How that relates to how my race ended up, I'm not going to give you like all the splits or anything like that, but I do want to just kind of share my mentality and my goal adjusting going in. I basically went into my Coros app the morning of the race once I saw that the wind was going to be changing. Originally, we were supposed to have a tailwind, and then depending on what weather app you looked at, it looked like we're going to have a headwind for half the race, which just was an indication that the front was kind of swirling, or the change, that there was just a lot of change kind of all happening at the same time during the marathon itself. So all that to say, I didn't completely throw time out the window, but what I did do was I took off my automatic auto timer. I usually do an auto lap timer about every 5,000 meters, about every 5K. And I basically took off any pace or auto timer, auto lap that I would get any feedback to my watch off of any screen. Of course, I was kind of looking at like the overall time, but I just knew that mentally I wanted to look at my watch when I wanted to and forget it when I wanted to forget it. So what I ended up doing was just kind of glancing at my watch about every other mile, because every other mile on the odd miles was aid stations, and so I would take water, I'd take ice, I'd take my fuel, and then on the even miles, I would kind of glance at my watch and see what my pace was doing for the overall time. So I just kind of kept tabs on kind of how I was going related to 6-minute pace. So to give you an idea, I thought I'd be coming in running 5:40 something per mile, and I started my first mile as slightly uphill. I went out conservative, and it was 6:03, and I was like, perfect. I'm just going to start a little slower, and then I just kept tabs on the easy math of 6-minute pace and saw how far I was under that at each mile. So I could kind of sense when a quick mile would go by or a slower mile would go by, but overall, I was running very much on feel, very much within myself, and just having an absolute blast. I'm telling you, at the start line, it was cool to be around everyone, and I haven't been to a big race like this in a long while. And, I've been to some long races and ultras and trail and all that, but that's just a different vibe, and I like that vibe as well. But when that gun went off and there was a stampede of runners with all of their shoes hitting the ground, and I'm seeing people to my left, to my right, in front of me, and just it was awesome. It brought me back. It didn't give me tears, but I'll talk about the tears I had later in the course. But I was just on cloud nine. We got like fighter jets going over us. We've got the big bullhorn. We've got the elite men going out before us. I'm lining up next to the elite women. Just good road marathon vibes. It's been a long while, and it scratched the itch. Okay, so I'm off and running pace. Found kind of a friend of a friend that I know here in Eau Claire. Zach Lee is a great guy. He's run 226, I think, 227, right around there. He thought maybe we'd run together or run low 230s or something. And we were just running pace with some people. And my crew I was supposed to see my family, which is my wife, my 3 kids. My mom was there. My cousin was there, her family of 2 kids and her husband, and my aunt and uncle. So I've got a crew. And I thought I'd see them at 5 miles, but they didn't know if they'd get there. And so I didn't see them at 5. That's a big aid station. But I saw some other people I knew from Eau Claire that gave me some good spectating vibes, feeding off the energy. And then I did see them at mile 7. And mile 7, they took me by surprise because I didn't think I'd see them. I wasn't expecting them there. But they just went to mile 7 because it was less crowded. And that is a moment I will never forget. I'm running pace. I'm feeling good. And all of a sudden I saw whatever it was, 9 people just cheering their heads off at me. Little Isabel, as my second cousin, was sitting in front of the cheer line, and that moment actually got recorded on the official Grandma's Marathon video. So I was happy to see that, and kept running pace, doing my fuel execution. And the only thing at this point that I thought was maybe just not totally off, but that just stuck out to me, was my adductors, the inside of my groin, like my adductors, the inside muscles there on the upper thigh were just a little twingy at like 10 or 12 miles. Just a little twingy. They weren't cramping, but they were just kind of like, hello, I'm right here. I'm a little twingy. And kept doing my thing, kept putting down water, kept putting down my fuel. I would take ice. I felt like a trail runner out there, to be honest. It's Western States this coming week, and I felt like I was like doing like a trail run in the summer. I would take ice and I would put it underneath my wristband. I keep a wristband on my hand because I sweat a lot, and I like to, wipe my brow and get sweat out of my eyes. So I have like a wristband, and then I ended up using that tight wristband to put ice underneath, and I think it helped a lot. My thought going into this marathon with heat was to be prepared for it. I did do 9 sessions of heat training, by the way, from about, about 15 or 16 days out. My last kind of longer run, 2 weeks out before the marathon. So 14 or 15 days out until about 3 days out. Between those, whatever that would be, between those 12 days, I did, I think, 8 heat sessions. I can get more into that later. I'm not going to give you my full regimen, but between some kind of sauna work or a heat suit, I was definitely preparing for the heat, and I feel like it paid off. Now, we're going to get into some later miles where I was cramping, and I've got some ideas on why that happened as well. But as far as feeling good, I felt like I managed the heat well, and I was doing my thing. And then we get to, more miles. I went through the half in 1:16 mid, like 1:16:30 something or 40 something. I actually have my Strava up here. I think I went through, whatever it is. 13.1 was roughly 1:16:40 something. Okay. So 1:16. And so I'm doing the math. I'm right on. I just feel like I hopefully can still run low 230s at this point. And my energy feels just fine. My breathing's good. I'm good to go. See the family again at 14, grab another gel. And this is where I probably had the most confidence, was at 14, because I felt great. We're getting past halfway. And then 15, 16, and I'm looking at my Strava where I eventually actually stopped. I believe was 16.8, and I did a long stop at 17.6. So 16 to 17 miles. I'm always telling people talk about the 20-mile mark so much in a marathon. 20 miles, 20 miles, 20 miles. You got to get to 20 miles, and that's the hardest part, the last 6 miles. I am telling you, most marathons I run, for me, mentally, the hardest part is 16. Because when you look at how much running you've already done, you've done 16 miles, it's really not starting to feel well, and you've got 10 miles left. 10 miles to go with how I feel at 16 is not a good feeling. So I knew that was coming. I'm prepared mentally to have that be a reality, but that's actually where I got punched in the face with some hamstring cramps. So the big story of the day was I slowed down in the last 10 miles in a kind of a big way, mostly to cramping, right? I had a lot of hamstring cramps. I think it could have been some nutrition and hydration that I just couldn't fuel myself enough, although I was doing so much electrolytes after I felt those. And it could also be my strength training, or I should say lack of strength training. That's probably one thing I haven't talked about this whole podcast series. That's the one thing I would do differently, would be to do more strength training to be a little bit more durable. I'm not quite sure. I've always had trouble with my right hamstring, especially. This has happened before in marathons. This has happened in other events. And I still am. I'm still honestly am kind of wondering why it had to happen at this one. I don't think it's all hydration, and I think it's kind of a combination of a couple things. So once again, I walk away knowing I could have kind of continue to improve myself, probably do a little bit more strength training next time, especially on the hips and the groin and the hamstrings. Last thing I'm going to say on that is I don't know if this relates at all. I just don't know. But looking back on it, it was just kind of weird. The day before the race, I'm doing a lot of, going to the bathroom. I'm very hydrated. My pee is somewhat clear. And there were 2 really weird diarrhea poops that I did. And I only mention that to say, you never really know sometimes if you're fighting off a bug, or I just had like the weirdest explosion of it wasn't crazy. And I don't know what. Okay. I didn't even know if I'd mentioned that on this, but when it comes to dehydration is my point. The only other thing I can think about is like those 2 weird little kind of diarrhea type of poops. So who knows? It might not even be related. It might be, but honestly, you can kind of tell. I'm still searching. I'm still kind of racking my brain why it cramped that badly, and it was mostly on the uphill. So it was every uphill after 18 miles, basically, I wasn't able to run even medium. I'd kind of have to just really baby it because they were about to go. And I stopped 3 different times for about a minute or so on each time, maybe more like 30 to 60 seconds on each time, to straighten my leg, to work out the cramp. And I could feel it. It's like a baseball in there on that right hamstring especially. So, yeah, definitely slowed down. I'm looking at my pace here as I go through, and Strava kind of gives you every mile, even though I'm not looking at every mile during the race. But this is a good transition into what I really wanted to talk about, which is the mental side. And what I take away as a huge win, to be honest, on this one is I never really gave up. Trust me, I wanted to give up. And at 16 or 17 miles, I had major doubts when that first kind of hamstring explosion happened. I had major doubts whether I was going to just need to kind of walk and hobble. Like, it was not going away for a long while. And then I would work it out. Then I'd kind of jog and fast walk and then get back on my feet, and then I get back to some pace. And honestly, after running 5:40 to 5:50 pace for a handful of miles, getting back into some kind of rhythm felt like I was going about 8 to 9 minute pace. It felt slow. I was discouraged, and I honestly thought that time was just completely wasted, and I was just bombing. That's how it felt. And it's interesting to look back at the data, and I can see on my Strava, I can kind of see on my GPS, like where I did actually stop and the pace goes way down. But where I settled into, my miles basically went from the high 5s to the mid to high 6s. Like, I still put together some 6:30s, some 6:26, 6:43. I did have 2 miles that were over 7 minutes, so 7:23. I think that's where I stopped for a long time at 18. Mile 20, 7:12. I think I stopped for about a full minute or 40 seconds there. So my point in saying this is it felt a lot worse than it actually was on paper. I come away with about an 8-minute positive split. And that means my second half of the race was 8 minutes slower than my first half of the race. An 8-minute positive split. And when I'm a couple days away removed from this, and I look back on it, and I look at my other races, and I have some experience, and I just talk to other people that ran the race, in a full marathon, an 8-minute positive split isn't ideal. I didn't plan on doing that. I'm not happy that it happened, but it really isn't a big tragic bomb. Like, you could be walking home in the marathon. 10-minute, 20-minute, 30-minute positive splits can be possible when you really blow up in the marathon. So what I'm proud of, and what I wanted to share mostly with you guys, was I kept it together and I ran with my heart. By the end, I basically stopped looking at my watch after mile 18, 19, 20 because I knew I was done. I think I remember looking at my watch at 20 and it was at exactly 2:01. So by that time, I knew I had blown 6-minute pace and I was just trying to get to the finish line. And I thought I was just hobbling in, to be honest. But when I'm objective about it, it wasn't as bad as I thought in the moment. It felt horrific. It felt terrible. I wanted to stop. I wanted to jump in the lake. That's literally what I wanted to do. I just looked at that lake and I wanted to jump in the lake. But these are the things that kind of kept me going. The three main things that kept me going was the people I knew, the people I didn't know, and the other runners. The people I know, the people I didn't know, and the other runners. So let me kind of take those in reverse. The other runners helped me in a way, even though they were passing me. I was getting to mile 20, 21, 22, and man, when you're kind of being passed and you're in a rough patch, my mental default is that I suck and everyone else is amazing. When someone passes you, you just assume that you are doing terrible and they are doing awesome. That's what it feels like. That's what it looks like. And what ended up happening later in the race was I saw some runners ahead of me that had passed me while I had stopped at these times, and I realized they weren't getting further ahead of me. We were actually running the same pace, so that gave me a little confidence. And then we went up another hill, and I had to kind of be tender with my hamstring and go slowly, but then I saw someone ahead of me stop and walk, and it kind of hit me. I was like, oh, I'm not the only one struggling out here. I'm not the only one going through hell. This is the marathon. People, it's time to get down to business. The last 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 miles of a marathon are tough, and it's tough for everybody. And that's what's universal between the front of the pack, the middle of the pack, the back of the pack. Everyone is going through somewhat of the same experience. And even though someone passed you 3 miles away, that doesn't mean that they're crushing it. They might be going through the same thing that you're going through at a different mile. So that, in a way, kind of gave me confidence that I wasn't alone in my pain. In fact, one of the guys that looked great going by me, at mile 20 or 21, I saw him sitting down in a wheelchair at mile 25 and a half. At mile 25 and a half, with a half mile to go in the last mile there, I saw him sitting down in a wheelchair. So keep the train on the tracks. Everyone's hurting out there. You might as well hurt together and keep her moving. And then, so that's the runners. The people I didn't know. Man, the cheer stations were awesome. The pickle juice guy was awesome. And when I say that, I mean there was a little tent, I think around 20. Honestly, some of the miles run together. So when I was hurting, how about that? When I was hurting, maybe it was 21 or 22. There's a guy that had and a girl that had a tent that said pickles over here. And I was like, man, I'm cramping. I need some electrolytes. I'm going to get some pickles and drink some pickle juice. And I went over there and it's like I made their day. I think they were expecting more people to come. Maybe earlier in the race, people have their fuel all figured out. But he yelled at me and said, we got first place pickle picker here. We got first place for the pickle pickers. So I guess I was the first person to grab a pickle from their station. And you know what? He probably said it kind of as a joke and it was an off comment, but it was a little bit of a boost. It was kind of a little victory that I needed in that moment. I'm like, heck yeah, man. I am in first place for the pickle pickers. I needed that little pick-me-up. Thank you for that little victory. And off I went. So even those little victories with the people cheering, I'll share one more from someone that I didn't know. I'm going through these aid stations. I'm starting to feel terrible. A lot of the aid stations, by the end, I had to kind of walk through and just keep going on the Powerade to get more electrolytes. And I look up after I'm walking and getting the Powerade in, and I see this guy handing out water, and he's got a sign above his head that says, Dad Hugs. Dad Hugs. And if you know anything about what's happened to me in the last year here, I've shared a little bit on the podcast. My father passed in February. And so this guy is standing there, and I think he might have been surprised that I took him up on it because I went right up to him and I just gave him a big hug. I said, I need a dad hug. And he was kind of surprised. I almost think I kind of scared him. And I think maybe they were expecting people in the 3, 4, 5, 6 hour group to do the dad hugs. And I don't know if I was the first one to do it or not. I assume I was, but I just told him real quick. I gave him a hug and I said, "You know what? My father passed in February. Thanks for being here." And off I went. I didn't really stick around, but it filled me up. If you're out there listening to this, thank you for the dad hug. It was much needed. Was starting to hit the fan. Excuse my language. And it was at the right place at the right time. Okay, and then lastly, of course, fueled by the people I knew. I've already talked about the 9 people that kind of followed me around. They saw me at mile 7. They saw me at mile 14. And then I knew when I would see them again at mile 24, between 14 and 24 were my hardest miles. And I knew when I saw them that they had seen me in a better place beforehand and had seen a lot of runners come by already that I had been ahead of before. And that was a special one downtown to see them. Of course, I saw them at the end as well. Very emotional finish when I saw my mom, because she said the same thing that my dad said to me before the race, before a different race that I shared with her. And so she said it afterwards. It was a very special moment, very painful finish line. I had to work out a cramp again after the finish line. And then the people that I know, I kept seeing these faces and, being around the running store here in Eau Claire, we get to see a lot of runners. You see a lot of people that are of all different abilities, that have all different reasons for being out there. And I actually saw one of my employees cheering for his girlfriend. I didn't even know I knew he was going to be up there, but I didn't know he was going to be right there. And so he kind of took me by surprise when I saw him early in the race. I saw 2 other of my employees that were running the race, or previous employees. I saw a handful of my footwear reps. I saw Tyler Morey out there cheering with the Mill City crew. Super excited to see them. I knew that they were going to be there. Tyler's a great guy. Great fan of the sport, fan of running in general. Gave him a high five. Man, I'm leaving a ton out because it was kind of overwhelming. Seeing people finish. I went back to the finish line and watched people finish. We saw Rachel, we saw Taylor, we saw, all kinds of people that we knew. We saw Alex, Wantor, and then we saw Matt Evans and saw him finish. I needed to see him finish. He is the creator of the marathon distance running class here in Eau Claire. He was my physics professor. He's been a friend of mine for over 20 years. He's always at the finish line of Eau Claire Marathon, so I needed to be at the finish line of the Grandma's Marathon. That's his hometown. That's his marathon that he's done for over 40 years, since the year I was born. 1983, I think, was his first one. And, I got the hometown treatment. I saw Matt Evans come across the line, took a selfie, chatted about the race, saw him at his house later for pizza, hung out with my family later for a grill out. It's just hard to put in words, honestly, sometimes when everything came together for this weekend. I was just so thankful to be around my favorite people. Getting a little, getting a little emotional here because, it was my mom's birthday the day before, her 70th birthday. And the year prior, we celebrated my dad's 70th. So we're starting to go through our first year here without Dad, and all these first things without him there. And even something as silly as running a stupid marathon that you run slower than you thought, and the cramps and the heat got to you, and it just puts it all in perspective that this sport is really not that important when it comes to how fast you run or what place you're in. The best part about this sport is the people. It's not your performance. So I think I just need to wrap up here. But man, my heart is full. Minnesota, you crushed it. I felt like the guest of honor. And I wasn't even in an honorable place. I just was another person coming from Wisconsin, enjoying your state, enjoying your Great Lake. There's something special going on up there, and it's not a month I would normally run a marathon. I don't like to run stuff in the summer. I don't even like to run stuff in the spring half the time. But I can see why people do grandmas. I can see why I'll do grandmas again. I have no idea when, but I can see why I'll be up on the North Shore again. That was special. That was special. Yeah, cheers, man. It's the people that make the event, not the other way around. So I'm going to sign off here. Sorry for making this last part awkward. I love you, Eau Claire. I love you, everybody. Stay tuned for the last episode of the marathon series, where we'll talk a little bit more about strategy with recovery and maybe what I'll do next. I've got a little bit of extra time in my schedule. I've been thinking about what I'm going to do next, but for now, man, I am going to Taco Bell. I am going to all the places that mess with my stomach during normal training. I do have a little thing for Whoppers. I do have a little thing for Taco John's, and I just don't do that stuff like in my 40s anymore. So usually after a marathon, the gloves are off. I'm eating whatever I want. I'm having a blast. I'm drinking caffeine if I want. I'm drinking coffee. I'm drinking soda. You got to let it down on the mental side. I'm having a blast reminiscing, and I'm having a blast recovering. You have to have these ebbs and flows in your yearly macro cycles, mentally and physically. And that's what we'll talk about next time. Until then, have a great day. I love you. I'm sorry for crying.
Fast. Or slow. Let's go!